Gunfire tears through the night like ripping metal, echoing across a frozen forest soaked in rain and smoke. Mud drags at heavy boots as a lone figure stumbles forward, breath ragged. Heart pounding so loudly, it nearly drowns out the distant artillery. A radio crackles, and her hand static, half-words, panic before going dead without warning. She stops abruptly, eyes scanning the darkness ahead, where the trees thin into nothing but shadows. Enemy voices rise behind her, close enough to hear boots snapping branches. She turns once, raises her hand to signal, and then she's gone. No scream, no struggle, no trail left behind. 3 days later, soldiers would return to this exact spot, and what they discovered in the mud would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Because whatever happened here wasn't just mysterious. It wasn't possible. And no one realized yet that this disappearance was only the beginning. Gunfire tears through the night like ripping metal, echoing across a frozen forest soaked in rain and smoke. Mud drags at heavy boots as a lone figure stumbles forward, breath ragged. Heart pounding so loudly, it nearly drowns out the distant artillery. A radio crackles, and her hand static, half-words, panic before going dead without warning. She stops abruptly, eyes scanning the darkness ahead, where the trees thin into nothing but shadows. Enemy voices rise behind her, close enough to hear boots snapping branches. She turns once, raises her hand to signal, and then she's gone. No scream, no struggle, no trail left behind. 3 days later, soldiers would return to this exact spot, and what they discovered in the mud would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Because whatever happened here wasn't just mysterious. It wasn't possible. And no one realized yet that this disappearance was only the beginning. Gunfire tears through the night like ripping metal, echoing across a frozen forest soaked in rain and smoke. Mud drags at heavy boots as a lone figure stumbles forward, breath ragged. Heart pounding so loudly, it nearly drowns out the distant artillery. A radio crackles, and her hand static, half-words, panic before going dead without warning. She stops abruptly, eyes scanning the darkness ahead, where the trees thin into nothing but shadows. Enemy voices rise behind her, close enough to hear boots snapping branches. She turns once, raises her hand to signal, and then she's gone. No scream, no struggle, no trail left behind. 3 days later, soldiers would return to this exact spot, and what they discovered in the mud would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Because whatever happened here wasn't just mysterious. It wasn't possible. And no one realized yet that this disappearance was only the beginning. Dawn arrived slowly, reluctantly, as if the forest itself resisted revealing what had happened during the night. Low fog clung to the ground, rolling between shattered trees and shell craters like smoke that refused to lift. The first recovery patrol moved in just after sunrise, boots sinking into mud churned by artillery and hurried movement. Every step felt wrong. Radios hissed with interference, compasses jittered uselessly. And the deeper the unit pushed forward, the quieter the forest became, not the calm silence of peace, but the unnatural stillness that follows violence. Somewhere nearby, something had gone terribly wrong, and every man there could feel it tightening around their chest. They found the footprints less than 100 meters from Carter's last confirmed position. Clear impressions. Standard issue boots, fresh. The spacing suggested she had been moving quickly but not running controlled, deliberate, trained. The patrol leader raised a fist, freezing the unit in place, and crouched to examine the ground. No signs of struggle, no blood, no skid marks. Just a single set of tracks leading downhill toward a shallow ravine. The patrol followed slowly, weapons raised, eyes scanning every shadow. The footprints crossed mud, broken branches, even patches of exposed rock where impressions shouldn't have been possible. And yet they were there, consistent and uninterrupted, as if the ground itself had yielded only for her. Then, without warning, the tracks stopped, not faded, not scattered, stopped. One footprint frozen mid-step, heel pressed into the earth, toe lifted as if she had simply vanished. The patrol leader stared at it longer than necessary, his mind refusing to accept what his eyes were showing him. Soldiers spread out instinctively, checking trees, scanning the ravine below, expecting to find a body, a drop, anything that would explain the absence. There was nothing. No slide marks. No fall. No sign she had been lifted or dragged. The forest floor beyond the final print was untouched, as if no one had ever passed through. Moments later, a soldier called out. Carter's radio lay several feet away, partially buried in mud, antenna snapped but casing intact. It should have been destroyed if she had been captured or attacked. Instead, it looked placed, set down deliberately, almost carefully. The battery indicator still glowed faintly when tested. Full charge. No outgoing transmission recorded after 2:17. Whatever had happened to her did not involve the desperate last call for help. Command was notified immediately. Orders came back fast and contradictory. Some demanded a wider search radius. Others warned the patrol to pull back immediately, citing increased enemy movement detected on the edges of the sector. Even as the patrol stood frozen over the impossible footprints, distant artillery thundered again, closer this time. The sound rolled across the forest in slow, heavy waves, each explosion followed by the dull echo of collapsing earth. Enemy guns were adjusting, walking their fire inward with unnerving precision. By mid-morning, the situation deteriorated rapidly. Forward observers reported enemy units advancing into the same grid. Carter had been assigned units that intelligence insisted were not scheduled to arrive for another 48 hours. Recon teams attempting to flank the area encountered unexpected resistance, as if the enemy already knew exactly where they would appear. It felt coordinated, anticipatory, wrong, somewhere in the command structure. Someone muttered the word no one wanted to say out loud. Compromised. Back at the command post, analysts replayed Carter's transmission repeatedly, slowing it down, isolating background noise. Beneath her voice, just before the message cut out, there was something else, a faint, rhythmic sound. Not gunfire, not footsteps. A low mechanical hum that did not match any known vehicle or aircraft operating in the region. The room grew quiet as the audio technician looped the final half-second again and again. No one offered an explanation. No one could buy. By afternoon, the search expanded despite the risk. Engineers swept the ravine for hidden traps or collapsed tunnels. Nothing. Medics scanned for blood traces. Nothing. Dogs were brought in, trained to follow human scent across battlefields. They tracked her path perfectly right up to the final footprint. Then they stopped, confused, circling the spot, whining softly, refusing to move forward no matter how much they were urged. One handler later admitted he had never seen behavior like it before or since. As the day wore on, pressure mounted. Enemy fire intensified. Allied units attempting to hold the perimeter began taking casualties. Ammunition reports came back uneven. Radios failed sporadically. The battlefield felt unstable, as if the rules governing movement, timing, and prediction had shifted just enough to turn planning into guesswork. Carter was no longer just missing her disappearance, was now actively destabilizing the operation. That night, under the cover of darkness, Command authorized a limited extraction attempt in the surrounding area. If Carter was alive, injured, hiding this would be the window. Flares arced into the sky, briefly illuminating the forest in stark white light. Shadows leaped and twisted between trees. And for a moment, just a moment, one soldier swore he saw a lone figure standing at the edge of the light. Helmet low, posture rigid, watching them. When the flare burned out, the figure was gone. No one else claimed to see it. No one pressed the issue. Shortly after midnight, enemy artillery struck the ravine directly, obliterating the site of the footprints. Mud and debris rained down. Trees splintered. The ground itself seemed to close over the mystery, erasing the last physical trace that Carter had ever been there at all. Any chance of a clean recovery was gone. Inside the command post, exhaustion set in. Officers argued in hushed voices. Intelligence officers compared notes, maps, timelines. Nothing aligned. Carter's route, enemy movement, the second transmission, the footprints. The impossible disappearance piece contradicted the others. And yet, beneath the confusion, a single unsettling pattern emerged. Every deviation, every unexpected enemy action. Every artillery adjustment followed the path Carter was supposed to take, not the one she actually reported. It was as if someone else had been walking her mission instead. As dawn approached on the second day, Command made a decision they would never publicly acknowledge. The operation would continue as if Carter were dead. Search efforts would be officially reduced. Her disappearance would be logged as combat loss pending recovery. But privately, files multiplied. Restricted memos circulated. Questions were asked that had no safe answers. Because by then, everyone involved understood one thing. Clearly, this was no longer just a missing soldier. This was a breach of reality on the battlefield, and whatever force, human or otherwise, had intersected with Carter's mission had not finished acting yet. By the third night, the battlefield no longer felt governed by strategy, but by momentum and uncontrollable slide toward something none of the officers could fully name. Allied units were advancing, yet every movement seemed anticipated. Enemy artillery adjusted faster than human calculation allowed. Supply convoys rerouted minutes before interception as if watched from above. Maps were revised again and again, only to become obsolete within hours. At the center of every deviation, every inexplicable enemy maneuver, was the same invisible reference point. The route Evelyn Carter had never completed. It was as though her mission continued without her, unfolding step by step in her absence. Command authorized a deeper intelligence sweep. Signals units began intercepting enemy communications at unprecedented volume, but what they heard only deepened the unease. Coordinates were exchanged that matched Carter's original reconnaissance path with uncanny accuracy. Timetables mirrored Allied projections that had never been transmitted. Even more disturbing were fragments of enemy chatter, referencing the woman in the trees and the quiet one who passed through. No capture reports followed. No interrogation logs surfaced. She was being spoken of, but not as a prisoner. As pressure mounted, Command made a controversial decision. Against protocol, they ordered a controlled push directly through the ravine sector where Carter's footprints had vanished. If the enemy was anchoring their movements to that location, then confronting it head-on might expose the mechanism behind the pattern. Infantry advanced under constant fire, engineers clearing obstacles that should not have existed according to any map. The terrain fought them, paths narrowing where none were marked, shallow ground giving way under weight, sound behaving strangely, echoing where it shouldn't, vanishing where it should have carried then, during a brief lull in the shelling. Something extraordinary happened. A forward observer reported seeing movement ahead, single figure. Stationary, silhouetted against the smoke. No return fire. No visible weapon. The description matched Carter's profile exactly. Height, posture, helmet angle. Before Command could issue an order, the observer's radio cut out. When the line was restored seconds later, the figure was gone, and the observer was shaken. Insisting the figure had turned slightly, just enough for him to see her face, calm, uninjured, watching him, not the battlefield. Moments later, a new transmission flooded the channel. Not Carter's call sign. Not enemy-coded. Open frequency. The message lasted only 3 seconds. It contained a string of coordinates, rapid, precise, spoken without urgency. Analysts froze. Those coordinates did not correspond to current enemy positions. They matched projected movements scheduled for the following day plans that existed only in sealed operational folders. Within minutes, Command verified the impossible. The transmission had originated from within the contested zone, yet no transmitter could be located. It was as if the signal had come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Command hesitated only briefly before acting. Units were redirected according to the coordinates. It was a gamble bordering on insanity. Yet when Allied forces arrived at the first location, they found enemy armor assembling exactly where the transmission predicted, caught unprepared. Engines cold, officers mid-briefing. The engagement was swift and devastating. A second coordinate led to an artillery depot hidden beneath camouflage, so convincing it had fooled aerial reconnaissance. The third revealed a planned encirclement that, if left undetected, would have annihilated 2 regiments before sunrise. By dawn, the pattern was undeniable. Someone or something was feeding its Allied command intelligence from the future, and every piece of it traced back to Carter. But the cost was escalating. Enemy forces, realizing their secrecy was compromised, launched a desperate counteroffensive. The battlefield erupted into chaos. Explosions stitched the horizon. Radios screamed with overlapping orders. Medics worked under fire, dragging wounded soldiers through smoke-choked trenches. Time compressed into fragment seconds, stretching unbearably long, minutes vanishing without memory. In the command post, officers watched maps light up with motion. Arrows colliding, lines bending toward a breaking point. Then came the moment no one could explain. Away. Carter's watch was recovered. A reconnaissance unit found it lodged in the bark of a shattered tree near. The final coordinate transmitted. The glass was cracked, the strap torn, yet the mechanism was intact. The hands were stopped not at the time of her disappearance, but several hours later, exactly matching the timestamp of the last unexplained transmission, engineers confirmed it was impossible. The watch could not have been running, and yet it had marked time beyond her disappearance, inside the watch casing. Etched faintly by a sharp object was a sequence of numbers. Another coordinate set command stared at it in silence. If this was a trap, it was the most elaborate deception the war had yet produced. If it was real, if Carter was somehow alive, moving, observing, then she was operating beyond any known framework of time, communication, or survival. And if they ignored it, they risked losing everything the intelligence had already gained them. The decision was made. They would act on it as Allied units advanced toward the etched coordinates. Enemy resistance intensified to a near-suicidal degree. It was as if the enemy understood instinctively that something critical lay ahead. Casualties mounted. Vehicles burned. The air vibrated with continuous concussion. And yet, step by step, Allied forces pushed through, driven not just by orders, but by the growing belief that they were following a path laid out by someone who could see beyond the immediate chaos. When they reached the final location, they found no enemy forces waiting. Instead, they found Carter, or what remained of her presence. Her body lay at the center of a shallow clearing, untouched by shrapnel, unmarked by battle. Her uniform was intact. Her face was calm, almost peaceful, as if asleep. There were no wounds. No signs of exposure? Medics confirmed death but could not determine when it had occurred. Her body temperature suggested hours. Her watch suggested days. Her transmission suggested something else. Entirely, clutched in her hand was a folded map, marked not with what had happened, but with what was about to, and as officers realized the implications of what they were holding, a final artillery barrage thundered in the distance, signaling the enemy's collapse along the very lines Carter's map predicted. And then in a moment no historian could explain. Everything changed. The war did not pause for Evelyn Carter. It never does. By the time her body was formally recovered, the front line had already moved miles beyond the clearing where she was found. Enemy positions collapsed along corridors her final map had predicted with surgical precision. Entire Allied divisions advanced without encountering the resistance they had braced for. In official reports, the victories were attributed to superior planning, air support, and enemy miscalculation. Her name appeared only once, buried deep in a casualty ledger, marked with the vaguest of conclusions, killed during reconnaissance operations. No mention was made of the transmissions, the coordinates, the watch, or the map that had guided men through the deadliest hours of the campaign. Behind closed doors, however, the story did not end. It fragmented. Officers who had witnessed the events were ordered to submit sealed statements, each stamped with classification levels that ensured they would not be opened for decades. Intelligence analysts were instructed to separate Carter's materials from standard battlefield documentation, Her map was removed from circulation and locked inside a steel case, cataloged under a designation that did not exist anywhere else in the system. When one junior officer asked why, he was told only that some information was operationally dangerous long after the operation ends. Those who handled her body noticed details they never officially recorded. Her boots showed no wear, consistent with the distance she was believed to have traveled. Her hands bore faint impressions, as if she had gripped cold metal for an extended period, though no such object was found nearby. The mud on her uniform did not match the soil composition of the clearing where she was discovered, but no one could identify where it did come from. A medic later confessed, in a letter never sent, that her body had been unnaturally warm when first examined, as though death had occurred moments earlier, despite the operational timeline insisting she had been missing for days. Her personal effects were returned to her family. Months later, in a small wooden box, there was no ceremony, no explanation, just a folded flag and a single typed letter expressing gratitude for her service. Her mother reportedly asked one question when the officer finished reading, "Did she suffer?" The officer paused too long before answering no. He would later request reassignment, citing fatigue. Years passed. Files aged. The war ended. But fragments of Carter's story surfaced in places they were never meant to appear. A declassified memo from the late 1950s referenced an anomalous intelligence source active during a critical phase of the campaign, described only as non-repeatable. A signals report noted transmissions with no identifiable point of origin, dismissed as atmospheric interference, despite their accuracy. A handwritten margin note on a strategic map read simply, "Follow her route." The author was unknown. Veterans spoke rarely, and only after years of silence. One artillery officer claimed his unit adjusted fire based on coordinates that appeared on his board without explanation, written in pencil by someone he never saw enter the tent. A radio operator recalled hearing a calm female voice on an open channel long after Carter was declared missing, correcting a targeting error seconds before shells landed. Another soldier insisted that, during the final push, he saw a lone figure standing at the edge of the battlefield, untouched by chaos. Watching the advance with something like relief, historians attempted to reconcile the accounts. Some argued Carter had been part of an unacknowledged intelligence experiment. Others suggested enemy deception or coincidental pattern recognition amplified by wartime stress. Officially, the military offered no comment. When asked decades later about her case, a retired general responded only that some missions succeed in ways we don't fully understand. Her final notebook remains partially classified. The last readable line has been released. It reads, "They aren't supposed to be here yet." No further explanation accompanies it. Today, Evelyn Carter's name appears on a memorial wall among thousands of others. There is nothing to distinguish her entry. No footnote. No asterisk. Visitors pass without stopping, unaware that her mission may have shaped the outcome of a battle they've read about in textbooks. That somewhere in the chaos of war, a woman stepped into a moment that did not follow the rules and never fully returned. And the most unsettling part, every few years a request is filed to fully declassify her records. Every time, it is denied. Because whatever Evelyn Carter encountered during that mission is still considered sensitive information, and the truth about what she saw. That night, what she became part of remains locked away, waiting for a time when the world might finally be ready to understand it. Until then, her story survives only in fragments, whispers, and unanswered questions, and somewhere in the archives, her file still bears a single handwritten warning: do not reopen.